Thank you for joining us for this very important discussion. In Her Company is a growing platform for women discussing how we create, build, and live. What began as a weekly radio show in 2009 with over 16,000 listens, featuring diverse women in business, is now a company with an expanded mission to help women answer the question, what's next, execute a plan to get it, and birth their huge, impossible visions. This mini series is an expression of our commitment to women to help them live more powerfully for themselves and the greater good of the world around them. In Wielding Your Voice, we will explore what it means to do so and wielding the power of our voice at the roots of issues rather than toward each other by touching up on four key areas: passion, purpose, pain, and responsibility. My name is Chris Vaughn. I am In Her Company's creator and founder. I am also a published author of fiction featuring strong female characters and a consultant to multi-passionate women. Joining me discussing responsibility is Naomi Hattaway, founder of I Am a Triangle, an international social network, and Eighth and Home Relocation, a nationwide network matching families on the move with realtors. She is passionate about community building, diversity, accessibility in online and physical spaces, and affordable housing so people can thrive, not just survive, in the places they call home. Naomi is currently running for city council in her hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, and consults nonprofits and organizations on inclusive program design, mutual aid, and housing solutions. Naomi, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, because it is really important, right? Especially, the power of that being that you are running to further help a community in ways that most people do not. So why don't you share with us, why are you taking part in this discussion?
Yeah, I think it's so important that the four pillars that you are having these conversations around are critical, I think, anytime, but especially now. Especially now where our country, our communities are in such need of leadership, and
Yeah.
responsibility really, really matters to me. It matters to me in the way that I raise my kids. It matters in the way that I interact with my husband inside of our marriage. And then if you go outside of that nucleus into the community and into civic engagement, responsibility is just something that each of us have. We're beholden to it, and so I'm happy to be talking with you about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Um, in fact, I'm a firm believer that the stronger people are, both male and female, because it's not either or, right? It's both. Um, the stronger people are the individuals in marriage, husband and wife, the stronger the children will be, the stronger the family will be, the stronger society, culture, and then the world around us. It kind of spreads outwards. Um, so, yeah, each of us has our share in that, definitely. But one thing that is quite prevalent now is everyone has a soapbox.
Yeah.
And if you remove the soapbox, everyone has a voice. And I'm using that term loosely. And so I think in some ways that voice um, is prevalent more so than substance because social media has been a bad parent, so to speak. It's given everyone the opportunity to say something.
Yep.
And over time, I've seen social media, and I'll say not even 10 years ago, where you were able to just have an open discussion, sharing ideas, and people coming together, with different opinions and whatnot, um, to now the accountability is removed. So, what's the responsibility that comes with using our voice?
It's so interesting that you said that accountability word because I just wrote it down as we were talking. I think that there is such a overlap and synergy between accountability and responsibility, and I honestly do think that we've forgotten how to be accountable to ourselves and
Yeah.
to others. It is so easy to spout off an opinion or a thought or a response to something that's happened on social media. And even so much as the design of social media, Facebook, I remember with the large community that you mentioned, I Am a Triangle, I was getting ready to move that group off of Facebook for several reasons back in 2017. And that's
Mhm.
when Facebook introduced the three little dots. So if you've just posted a comment or if you're in a group, the three little dots were introduced as a way to tell you that someone was responding to your comment. So it further took away our accountability to each other by asking us to stay in that moment and see what someone was going to say. So instead of even taking the
Wow.
time to first think about what we are saying and how we're using our voice, but how that could resonate with others, social media has just asked us to sit in the cesspool with everybody, with everyone's
Yes.
comments, everyone's instant reactions. And
Mhm.
um, I think it's harmful. I think that I saw someone post the other day, and I can't remember who to attribute the quote to, but it basically was, I need more than 60 seconds to form an opinion about something that I've just seen. And so give me some space to come
Yeah.
maybe tomorrow or maybe in 3 days or maybe in 1 week to tell you how I feel about it. And as I'm entering this political space of needing to have an opinion or a response to everything, I'm really sitting back into, almost physically onto my heels to wait and have part of my responsibility be to wait. And that's my personal accountability. That's going to come with using my voice is that I'm not so quick to respond, so that I can be informed and give me a hot second to feel what I feel about using my voice and my reactions to things. That was a long
Right.
answer.
No, no, that's great because this is a conversation. And, that's a perfect example of that, because we want to form our words and we want to get to the point. And even in giving a response, in the process of giving a response, there are times where we're still processing it. And by
Mhm.
speaking, we gain clarity on what it is that we want to say in a direction that we want to take. Unfortunately, we're seeing these processes rather than being contained within our minds and rather than the quiet moments to think about our things for ourselves, we are seeing even the process that play out online, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has seen someone post something, which is so obviously spur of the moment. They post something and then 100 comments later they have the exact opposite view. And so, what would have happened if they would have processed that quietly, silently, or just to themselves, or just around a group of, physical friends in that discussion? Would that post have even been shared? But now, because it's shared, you have 100 other people that are railing off of this ideal, and then the person's done an about face. And so it's like, what was the purpose of the conversation to begin with?
Well, and I'm even seeing, I think it's referred to as dirty delete, where someone has posted their thoughts. They
Mhm.
realize later that maybe the group think says that they're wrong. So then you see people start to delete and pull back their words, and that's not responsibility.
No.
I think there's a flip side to all of this as well, where especially women I see are worried and scared about saying the wrong thing, and so they couch their voice and their words with, I
Yeah.
don't know, might not be right. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Go easy on me. Don't beat me up. Instead of just, again, pausing, being very grounded and connected to what it is that you want to use your voice for, and then
Mhm.
unapologetically saying the words. I think that we just hear so many women second guessing themselves publicly when they speak. It would just be nice to start seeing more of us take a breath, take a hot
Yeah.
minute, and then stand solidly when we speak and use our
Exactly,
voice.
because that is your own unique view. In fact, we are going to get into that deeper, further into the conversation. But while we're on it, what are some guidelines and considerations that you think would be wise before we even use our voice for anything?
So I have a couple of thoughts on that, and one of them, I actually broke my own rule.
Uh-oh.
I typically really feel that it's important to be able to give credit to others' words when we're using them. So I referenced the 30-second wait meme that I had seen. I can't remember who to give credit to, but I do think it's important when we can, as a guideline, to try and remember and give credit where credit's due when we are using someone else's voice in tandem with what we're saying or with our opinion. Um, if you can't remember, obviously, whose credit it should be given to, I think it's helpful to say something like, part of my views are informed by women such
Right,
as, um,
right.
and I think it's really important, Chris, to be well read. Whether you have time for a full book, um, there's always author interviews. There's always ways that you can dig into a little bit of research to know just a little bit more about something. Um, I believe in both in the power of my voice and what I have to say, and the power of being informed by other strong women and men and people that identify, as non-binary. I think that it's important to be informed by other people. So that's one guideline I would have in terms of using our voices. Um, a little bit of a caveat though with that. One of my imposter complex syndrome things shows up often when I feel that I don't know enough to speak on my own merit. And I often spin a little bit and go looking for someone else's maybe well established voice to kind of pin onto because mine might not be as well known or I might not feel as confident. So maybe there's a lesson for myself in this conversation too. That maybe we all need to remind ourselves we do know enough about the topics we're passionate about or
Exactly,
about what we believe in.
exactly. It's, two things with that. I've, heard it said, and I can't remember the source, but I have heard it said, "If you do not have time to inform yourself, you do not have time to form an opinion."
Mm, that's
Okay?
powerful.
Yeah, it is because there are so many bandwagons and then group thought, as you mentioned, that is so easy to jump on board. And social media in particular has created a place, not the only area, of course,
Right.
but where you see it more in real time has created a place where you can drive a thought and it's like, what is it? Where is this going? The other thing is we have to, and yeah, we have to understand that even thought leaders, even people who are now better known than us, were at one time unknown.
Yep.
And just because someone is a recognized name does not make your voice any less valid, any less credible,
Yep.
any less experienced. That's something that when I was running in her company solely as a podcast, the weekly, not podcast, it was actually a weekly radio show at the time, and we showcase purposely women who were just as credible, just as talented, just as experienced as their better known counterparts. And they did not have a platform for their voice because of that. But not only did they not have a platform because they didn't even know each other.
Yeah.
And so it was absolutely a thrill for me to highlight these women, to call attention to the work and projects that they were doing, and to bring them together because we're stronger together.
Mm.
But I understand that sometimes we find ourselves in situations and we're like, okay, so maybe if I attach my opinion, my thoughts to somebody else who thinks the same, it won't sound as bad as off or whatever the situation may be. But at the end of the day, you still have to stand behind what you yourself said.
Yep.
And it takes strength and courage to do both. I fully understand. Um, let's discuss in line with that ideas. They
Yeah,
have consequences and repercussions. And people don't like to hear that, but ideas do have consequences.
yeah.
And I mean, good and bad, good and bad. So, what are some of these consequences, are repercussions that we should be prepared for, even if we are right?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to that vacuum of social media, where putting your ideas out there on something like Twitter or Facebook or even Instagram, um, I think being just prepared and knowing exactly what you just said, knowing that there are repercussions to our ideas, is probably the first step, is just being aware of that. Um, I am a firm believer in having a small group of advocates and champions that believe in you and the work that you're trying to do, especially inside of a social media platform. So, for example, on Facebook, if I'm going to talk about the need for affordable housing in a community so that we can make sure that our teachers have places to live when they're tasked with teaching our children, I
Right.
know that I've got 2 or 3 people who may not believe the same way that I do, but they can be, kind of in the comment section, so to speak, to help navigate dialogue. I think it's important that if we're using our voice and speaking out in social media, that we not try and do it on our own in terms of
Okay.
the conversation. By using our voice on social media, we're asking for a conversation. I think that's important
Exactly.
too.
Exactly.
Uh, and
People
the
don't
reper
tend to understand that either. It's like you posted this on a public forum. You don't get to dictate how the conversation goes.
Exactly. I firmly believe that, and I see a lot of folks, and I understand why, talking about this being my platform or my page or my space,
Mhm.
uh, in
Oh gosh,
response.
you said MySpace.
That's a blast from the past.
I'm so sorry, Tom. But
But no, I think people, again, women especially, tend to feel that if I've built an Instagram account, that what I say there is my world, and they want to protect that, and I think that that is maybe
it
one
is
way of
to a
looking at
certain
it.
extent, but your page
Yeah,
should be private if that's the case. So
exactly, exactly. So I think that if you're coming out to say something or using your voice, I think it's helpful to know if you're going to have a couple of people that will just help you. You don't have to be um, formally moderating comments, but to have someone there to just say, "Here's how I feel about it," to help that conversation along. Um, I think it's also super important to know that your integrity can and will be questioned. Um, Now, what we do with that line of questioning is up to us, but it shouldn't come as a shock to us as we practice and start to use our voice, that people will want to question your integrity and will want to question your lived experience. And I think for me, I've learned along several different experiences that what I've lived through and what my story is not to be questioned or challenged. What I say
exactly.
can be discussed and we can have a dialogue around how that's informed what I believe. So I think that's important for the women that are listening or whoever's listening. Feel very solid in the fact that your experiences are that they're yours. So when your integrity is questioned or when your ideas are challenged or there's that repercussion, separate the two. I use my arm often as an example of, the conversation that I'm having is inside my hand. I'm offering that as a dialogue, but my arm is outstretched so that I protect my heart. There's some space between
Ah, that's good.
and what I'm offering as a conversation. So I think that's
That's
important to
good.
remember. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. That's very good. That is very good. Um, you know, one thing that people have to realize is that all questions don't deserve an answer.
So true.
And and it should be taken as a hint when
Yeah.
a question is not answered. Of course, within unless there's extenuating circumstances surrounding that. But you don't have to. It takes so much energy to answer every naysayer or to address every situation where people would want you to defend yourself. And in most cases, it's not necessary. You know, your walk, your talk, the work that you do is response to that. How you live your life is in response
Yep.
to that. And the challenges with so many voices being around us is recognizing when we should continue to do the work and not seek to spend so much energy defending ourselves when we know what the outcome is going to be on the other side of that. Because some of those people may actually become your champions as a result.
Right.
What's the difference between being heard and being understood?
Yeah, such a good question. And I had a couple of different, in thinking about that question, I went down a couple of different paths. One of the things I want to make sure
Well,
to say,
let me add another path to that. I'll be devil's advocate here. So let's say, and feel free to explore all your paths.
yeah,
But let's say, what's the difference between being right versus being heard versus being understood?
yeah. I think it's important to say that I believe that the strongest leaders are able to say, I don't know. Um, and I think that that goes kind of hand in hand with the concept of being right. Um, there's a lot of moments that we are asked to use our voice when sometimes the bravest answer is, you know what, I don't know. Will you give me a minute to go do some research? Or will you give me a minute to think about that? Sometimes our answer, instead of trying to be right, could also be, can you tell me more about your experience? Um, that does two things. Strategically, you know, my political candidate hat on. Strategically, that gives me time to think of my response and to be a little bit more well informed and well formed.
Yeah.
Um, but empathy asks us to understand the other person's pain. And I don't think we can do that when we're so focused on us being right. Um, and we can't have a dialogue. A dialogue is the conversation and the words exchanged between two or more people. And so if we're only focused on ourselves being right, there's no space and no energy for the other person's experience or pain or story or what have you. Um, so I try and not be right. I always want to lend my experience to a conversation, but even
Mhm.
that is not necessarily right. I think, you know, there's two sides to every story, your right and my right. Um, and so I think
That's
I
good.
I lean more towards the being heard and understood. I think there is a difference between those two as well. Um, I would probably align myself more with the importance of being understood, um, because I think that there's a little nod that I might give if you're speaking your truth and I'm just hearing you. I can nod my head and be like, "Yep, yep, I hear you." If I'm seeking to understand, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with you, but I'm at least
Right.
holding space for what you're telling me and me acknowledging that what you're telling me is your truth. So I think we can go, you know, being right is kind of the first pinnacle that you want to jump over and leave that behind as something you don't want to strive for. Being heard is probably the most accessible thing we can all practice is hearing each other and listening. But then that third pinnacle of understanding and empathy. You said something a bit ago too about the energy that it takes, um, and how important it is to know that not all questions have to be answered. And I think that that falls very closely in line with putting yourself in others' shoes. Also, it takes a lot of energy to debate someone's expertise or debate their story or debate their experience.
Yeah.
But when you just sit next to them, that doesn't take so much energy. And I think we could all be better served by just taking that step of just sit down next to someone and seek to be understood or seek to understand, I guess, rather.
And so what I hear you saying is that each one of those being right, heard, and understood is a level of depth that we have
Mhm.
to intentionally delve into. Um, because they can strengthen the conversations, especially the honesty of conversations.
Yeah.
And that even though you may even add empathy to that, um, you have to be prepared to accept that the outcome may not be as you like. And in some cases, that may be perfectly okay because we all are not going to agree. And
Mhm.
there's a way that there are differences even in unity. And people find that hard to accept. We can be unified and agree on something universal. Like, yes, there needs to be, like global peace. There needs to be, a stop to war. We need to be more sustainable in our living and whatnot
Yeah.
for the betterment of ourselves and, for the planet. But our approaches to that will, of course, be different. Um, so, sometimes it boils down to what's being solved.
Yeah.
And you don't get to the bottom of that without conversation at some point.
Mhm.
In
I
those
think
moments, so no, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think the other thing, to tie back responsibility to the concept of being understood or seeking to understand, I think we also have a responsibility to each other to help bolster each other's voices. And in the listening that we can offer someone else, that gives someone else space to kind of ruminate and marinate on their ideas and let their ideas get out into the world and then see how it bounces off of things or see how it feels when you actually speak your words out of your mouth instead of just thinking about them in your head. And so I think
Right.
um, that if we try to not be right all the time, it also allows other people space for their ideas to percolate and kind of come into the mix and see how it lays and lands. So that's another piece of the responsibility that I think we owe each other in conversation and dialogue.
Yeah, because, their ideas may change because there are moments when because people have not been heard, because they have not been understood, that they lead with whatever this, singular thought is or whatever the singular idea is. And they're more forceful with it than they would be had they been, extended an opportunity to be understood. So by creating space for someone, we allow them even to further explore their own ideas, and even an opportunity to change their mind. I'm thinking in particular, um, this one verse. It says, "The way of a man," and I'm paraphrasing it, but it says, "The way of a man seems right until his brother comes along and sits down beside him, or until his brother comes along and questions him."
Yeah,
And with so many ideas floating around, it's easy to just grab one and like, yeah, I'm running with this and whatnot. It's like, okay, so while you and the other 10,000 people associated with that ideal are running, have you yourself thought about what that is and where it's going to take you?
absolutely. Well, and that's such a great point about not being heard in the past. I've been watching our city, Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of the
Mhm.
country. Often is just referred to as this great place to raise a family, which it is, but not for everyone. Um,
Okay.
and current climate of protests and rising up and anger and a need for healing, what we see is that what you were saying, that singular issue of whatever it might be, police brutality or um, uprising and unfair treatment and racial inequality and all of those things. But if we get just on the other side of what we're hearing the loudest, you hear hurt and you
Yes.
hear being ignored,
Pain.
you hear oppression and you hear pain. And so
Yes.
what happens is our elected officials, because they're so intent on being right and so intent on saying, well, this is the way we've always done it and this is the way the process works, they're not able to get around that just the other side. And so they're not hearing the need for healing and the
Hmm.
pain. All they hear is the loud voice that says, we demand change, or we want
Right.
this, or we will protest in the street. And watching that clash happen, and it's not a clash, but the lack of willingness to let people be heard is part of the reason that I wanted to get into politics. Was I think that it's our responsibility to reshape the way that our residents and our community members are heard and understood. Um, yeah, I'll stop there.
Maybe we'll bring you back for that other segment that we're doing, because that's something why one of the four topics that we're touching on, or one of the four areas that we're touching on when wielding your voice, is pain, because people often carry around more pain than what they themselves are even aware of. And when it comes to using your voice, or wielding your voice, is how we are in this series, people's voices can become weapons
Yeah,
because they are speaking from a place of pain, from a place of hurt. And that needs to be squared away, because if you speak from that place, you're not only going to contaminate your own environment, but you're going to harm someone. You're going to do more damage than good. So your intention can be great. You can have an awesome intention, but speaking from a place of pain will get you a totally different outcome each and every time. And you will only promote the very thing that you yourself don't want until that's handled with. So, yeah, yeah, pain is
yeah.
definitely, that's a key factor.
Yeah, and you said something very early on in our conversation around having, a small group of people that you can trust and be yourself with. And I think,
Mhm.
if we look at like a ripple effect on the water, that first ripple um, is important to have people that you can trust with your pain. Um,
Right.
Social media, I don't know that we always want to be ready to trust the internet and strangers with our pain.
No,
So yeah,
yeah, it's not always wise. Not
yeah.
always wise. Um, so, in light of that, though, how do we shape this wonderful, powerful gift of our voice that we've been given? How do we shape what we will?
Yeah. So I worked with this really amazing coach. Her name's Tanya Geisler, and in the conversation and in the process of working with her, I was trying to kind of hone my leadership skills and figure out what
Mhm.
was next and figure out what I should do with this big, beautiful life I've been given, and all of the things. And in the conversation with her, it just came to mind the beauty of imagery around riverbanks, and so that's become kind of the way that I live my life and the way that I encourage others to um, imagine. Riverbanks hold up the sides, and in the middle, the river goes and flows and does kind of whatever it wants. The river can't be contained, but there are the riverbanks. There are kind of the absolutes of where that water is to be. And if we let ourselves, our integrity, when that starts to crumble, when we let the importance of being right take over everything else, the riverbanks, I think, can start to crumble a little bit, which allows seepage, which
Mm.
starts to make messiness. And it's hard to put the water back once it's seeped over the edges. So I think, in shaping your voice and shaping what you wield, um, maybe it's worth doing some journaling or some thought around, like, what would your riverbanks be? What's on your left and what's on your right? Um, it also goes back to what we were talking about before about changing our minds. I think that's so crucial that we allow ourselves the grace and the space to change our minds, or
Mhm.
to let someone else's story change the way that we see something. And if you imagine water, um, it is fluid, and it has the ability to be ever changing. Your riverbanks don't, though. They
Right.
stay very firm into what I believe and what's okay and what I allow. So I just think it's really important to have some boundaries, have some belief pillars that you can stand squarely on, but then letting yourself navigate changing your mind and letting your voice take different shapes as you grow and as you change your leadership structure and style.
See, I'm writing that down. That's good. But it's also true, though, And I'll use this as an example because I don't think people, we want to be the best that we can at anything, and I would like to think that when most people use their voice, they do it with good intentions. However, you know, there's a tendency, especially nowadays, to want to allow everything, to want to be politically correct, to um, want to like provide space for everything. And I'm like, within the scope of a human life, you can't do that.
Mhm.
And you know, there needs to be some boundaries and guidelines, core things. Like, you know,
Yes.
pick your corners, you know, what four things shape me, what are my non-negotiables? And you don't need to consider each and everything that's in the world. One is impossible, you know.
Yeah.
We all have our affinity towards whatever our likes are, whatever things that we love, whatever we gravitate towards. Those are things that make us us.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, and that way, if something comes up, yeah, you can, you know, think about that, educate, inform yourself, of course, before even come to an opinion. But even that, even in saying that, it's not necessary to have an opinion about everything.
Right.
You may
Yeah.
never ever, you know, venture there. So don't put that stress on yourself.
So true.
Um, you know, just have, like you said, know what your boundaries are, know what your core beliefs, know your non-negotiables, and then, you know, flow and allow other people to do so also. Because you can extend freedom to someone else, a freedom that they themselves never realized was possible by the way that you shape your voice, by the way that you allow them, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gives everybody to the freedom to kind of step back and say, you know, that's good. I don't have to have an opinion about this, or if I do, let me share what, you know, my four corners are or my core is, and, you know, let's discuss. And it takes the pressure
Well,
off, don't you think?
it does take the pressure off, and it also it's a recipe for collaboration. When we know what our four corners or our riverbanks are, it lets us collaborate more intentionally with women or men or non-binary folks in ways that we can't. So I'm thinking a good example. You had mentioned maybe you would ask me to come back on to talk about pain, and my instant thought
Mhm.
was, actually, I'd love for you to talk to Candy about that. You know, someone that I
Okay.
know that actually
Okay.
gives a better voice to leadership and responsibility and pain. And I think that because I know what my riverbanks are, I know that your audience will be better served by talking maybe with Candy than me. And if I know that one of my corners might be the fact that I feel very strongly about affordable housing, that way, when someone comes to me and wants to talk about domestic violence and survivors, I can just say, that's important to me. And I think that you should talk to Joni because Joni has
Right.
devoted so much of her life and she's a better voice to that. Um, and it goes kind of to that passing of the mic, which I think is another piece of responsibility that we have.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't have to be our voice. It can and should be the voices of others. Um, Arlen Hamilton, who is an amazing venture capitalist, she's a Black woman who was homeless and has created this amazing um, Black focused venture capital
Yeah, I'm
network.
familiar with her. Yeah.
One of the favorite quotes of hers is that collaboration is not additive, it's a multiplier. You know, we don't
Mm.
collaborate
Mhm.
and add one thing to the next, it's a multiplier. And I think that when we pass the mic and when we allow others' voices to be heard, it really does impact so much more than we could ever just with our voice by ourselves.
Right, right. Being a catalyst.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being a catalyst.
Yeah.
So, can you share with us one of your personal experiences or lessons learned, valuable lessons learned? I'm sure that there were many given the nature of your work, but what's one of your personal experiences or lessons learned that you think is like really like valuable?
Yeah. You know, I think that what I'll say is maybe not for everyone or maybe not for everyone right now, but I think it's worth recounting an experience I had. I was asked to speak at a conference, and I really was going back and forth on what I was going to say and how I was going to get my message across. And someone said to me, "You just need to tell your story." I was like, "Yeah, it's a bunch of lawyers in the audience, though. Like, they're not going to want to hear my story." Um,
Lawyers are people too.
they are, and that is
They are.
that's exactly the point. So I
Yeah.
got up. There was 300 of them. I told my
Oh, wow.
story, and guess what happened when I was finished? They came up to me. There was a line of people that said, "Thank you for telling your story. I saw myself in this piece," or "This
Awesome.
resonated with me." And I think there's a concept about signaling. When we use our voice and when we sit in integrity with our lived experience, and when we are responsible to not be right, but just to tell our story, we signal to other people. And that lets other folks say, "Oh, that's me too." Or "That happened in my life." Or um, "I can resonate with that." And that's how we start to build the power of community, and the power of folks to be able to get stuff done is by signaling and increasing our networks and our the people that are in our lives. So I think my experience would be, I could have stayed very corporate, and I could have,
Yeah.
had that speech be something that was a little more rudimentary and surface. But instead I went deep and I told my story and my experience, and it connected with the people on a deeper level. um, and so I think my encouragement would be just to, obviously, we don't want to, you don't, going back to pain, you don't want to tell too much of your story, or you don't want to say things that you're not ready um, to have
Right,
out there.
because there's a way that to handle that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But if we're not willing to get a little bit of ourselves out there in that signaling, we'll never, we're harming ourselves in not being able to tell our full story, I guess. That came out in a messy way. But um, the more willing we are to share and use our voice in that way, the more it encourages others, and the more that we kind of bolster others' experiences as well.
That's, I believe what you're saying is no matter what the situation is, don't forget the humanity behind it.
Hmm.
Every movement, every idea, every profession, every corporation is built of people,
Hmm.
and it's so easy to want to keep things detached
Yeah.
at such a high level view that even the people themselves can't even see it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you can follow me on that. But if we remember the humanity,
Yeah.
that that's what we all are, that's the thing that unites us.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for women on wielding their voice?
I think there's two things that I would say. One, for the people that love social media and have accounts that they spend time with, I would challenge you to shift who you're listening to. Add a couple new voices to your feed. Change the diversity of who you listen to, and whether that is someone who presents differently than you do because they have a disability, or someone who's lived in another country, or someone who just looks differently than you or votes differently than you.
Yeah.
I think that would be one suggestion and challenge, would be just change who you interact with and who you bump up against in your day. This is being recorded while people are still, in pandemic quarantining.
Right.
So it looks a little different for us right now, but you can still change your online experience of who you're interacting with. Um, I think the other thing would be to going back to just be willing to say that you don't know, whether that's because your platform is your kitchen table with your children or whoever it is that you share a home with,
Yeah.
whether your platform is, behind a podium and you're giving a speech, whether it's to the 200 people that are in a Facebook group with you. It is okay, and I would highly encourage practicing the words "I don't know." Um, I think if more teachers, more professors, and more elected officials would say, "I don't know," I think we would find ourselves in a much different place of collaboration and humanity. To go back to that
Yes.
concept of humanity, that's, I think, my two things: um, change who you are interacting with, and then practice saying, "I don't know."
See how the river flows with that.
Yes. Yep.
Naomi, thank you so much for lending your voice and your insight. Greatly appreciate you being here for this
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you.
And our viewers, I hope you also have found today's conversation insightful toward helping you better wield your voice. I invite you to become part of this growing platform for women that we are building at In Her Company. And I look forward to your feedback, not only on this, but our other segments in the series. So once again, my name is Chris Bond. This is In Her Company.